It is the year 1887, and two brothers arrive in the city of Detroit with great dreams in each other. A few years later, they are managing one of the city's largest mechanical workshops, working for the man who would shape the future of cars, the auto industry. This man is Henry Ford. But what many do not know is that these brothers were fundamental to the success of Ford Motor Company. Virtually every pieces of their cars were made with the highest quality, which is an essential part for the T model, one of the most iconic cars in history. Without the contribution of these brothers, the T model would not have existed, and Ford Motor Company would not be the great company it is today. Despite their impressive achievements, these brothers remained in the shadow of Henry Ford. Later, they decided to open their own car company and compete in the automobile market. They even managed to become the second best-selling car company in the United States, behind only the company that was once his business partner, but now he was a competitor. However, luck has not always been in favor of these brothers. His partnerships came down, but left behind a legacy that few recognized. Although their names are not so well known, they contributed to millions of cars around the world. This is the tragic history of the Dodge brothers. In the 1860s, two brothers called John and Horace Dodge grew up in the small town of Niles, located in the deep southwest of Michigan. His father managed a mechanical workshop next to his two brothers, where they built and kept boat engines. Growing up in Niles, John and Horatio have learned to be dedicated workers and not complaining about their economic situation. They considered that their childhood had not been easy, as they were the poorest children in the city at that time. When the cold arrived, they were forced to walk barefoot and wear simple and torn clothes. However, they did not complain and tried to make the mother think everything was fine. Despite these challenges, this modest origin approached them as partners instead of rivals. Despite the 4-year difference between them, they have shared a strong work ethic from young people and took any work available to support the family. In 1882, the family had to move from Niles to Battle Creek and then to Port Huron due to the collapse of family business. As teenagers, John and Horace began working alongside their father at the manufacturing company of Upton, who specialized in steam engines and thrusters. It was there that the brothers became skillful drowners and gained experience in iron and steel. These responsibilities have become a passion for them, as they in love deeply with their craft. However, John, the eldest, was not pleased to stay in Port Huron. He decided to look for better opportunities outside the city. When he turned 21, with only 50 cents in his pocket, John left for Detroit, one of the most prominent industrial cities of that time. Arriving in Detroit in 1886, John started working at Murphy Iron Works, a company specializing in steam boilers for stationary and maritime engines. He earned $16.50 a week. A year later, Horace also moved to Detroit, and as expected, John got a job for his younger brother, earning $13.50 a week. The two brothers were very fond of the heavy work they did. Working in a smoke-filled store may have been a reason why John developed tuberculosis, a serious disease at the time. This scared the family and left him sick for a few months. He took many medications to recover, including a liquid called Elixir 130, which contained plenty of alcohol. This made him dependent on alcohol and drink a lot. This reputation for drinking a lot was something the brothers would take with them throughout their careers. On the other hand, Horace had to get a second job to take care of himself and his older brother. This new work put him in contact with a man named Henry Leland. This man would create the brands of cars Cadillac and Lincoln. Mr. Leland brought very high work patterns to Detroit. Horace gained a lot of experience working with him. When John recovered from tuberculosis, the brothers decided to look for a safer and clearer job so that their health was not harmed. They started working at Dominion Company, Canada, where they made print machines. They learned to use special tools that made their work more accurate. During this time in Canada, the brothers made their first foray into the transportation industry. Horace invented a 4-point bike ball with an innovative design. This ball was good because it did not accumulate dust and provided a soft ride with little effort. Following the success of the bicycle ball invention, the brothers partnered with one of Dominion Company's managers named Fred Evans. Together, they established the Evans and Dodge Bicycle Company in 1897. They used their patented invention in the manufacture of bicycles. This company has grown rapidly, mainly because of Fred Evans' sales skills. He traveled to show bicycles in the United States, and their sales increased a lot. However, competition in the bicycle industry in the late 19th century became intense and threatened the company's future. Nevertheless, the brothers still had good jobs and received money from their inventions. However, they decided it was time to leave the bicycle industry behind and look for a new business. They sold their company shares for $7,500 and used the money to open their own mechanical workshop called Dodge Brothers in 1900. They didn't know at the time, but that decision would change the entire car industry in the United States and worldwide. By the time they opened the workshop, John was almost 36 years old and Horace was 32 years old. They brought advanced equipment and set up a team of 12 people. They began to build and fix all kinds of machines, from farm equipment to stationary engines. In less than 3 months, they have established the reputation of the workshop as the best place for accurate and close machine work. Customers from all over the state came to them. Although they had a good reputation, the brothers faced some problems at first. They dealt mainly with small companies that often delayed their payments due to limited budgets. However, everything changed when they were approached by a man named Ransom Elds. He needed help producing parts for his car business, Olds Motor Works. He had great plans to make cars more accessible to people. He created and patented an assembly line in 1901, which allowed his cars to be produced faster and more efficiently. Dodge Brothers began producing pieces for these cars, and this partnership boosted their business. Therefore, they were producing not only parts, but also complete components for other car manufacturers. With the experience they acquired working with cars, the brothers began to dream of the idea of creating their own car. They saw the potential of the automotive market and knew they could do something big. However, this idea led them to a new phase of challenges and opportunities. They were ready to enter the auto industry even more significantly. The manufacturing company wanted to greatly increase the amount of things I was doing. After listening to the Dodge Brothers store, she hired them to make engines and parts to her car called Curved Dash. This car was small and reliable for the time. The brothers made high-quality pieces, and at the end of the first year, the Curved Dash was a commercial success. Hundreds of people wanted one, and that made it the first car that gasoline sold in significant numbers in the United States in 1902. The following year, they manufactured 2,500 of these cars. This made business grow up so much that the Dodge brothers needed a larger space to work in the city. Their partnership with Oldsmobile, also known as Olds Motor Works, made them rich and recognized as good car makers of reliable car. They were successful not only because they were good mechanics, but also because of the hard work and the good decisions they made. They had already worked on machine factories and run a bicycle company in Canada, which gave them the knowledge necessary to run a business efficiently. The name Dodge has become known for doing good quality and reliable things. This led them to a man named Henry Ford, who would change his lives forever. Together, they transformed the car industry. In 1902, 39-year-old Henry Ford was trying to start a car company for the third time. He had already failed in the first 2 attempts. He was looking for someone who could make pieces for his cars and heard of the Dodge brothers. He went to check what they were doing. They met in person, and after meeting them face-to-face, Henry was very impressed with their work. He immediately offered an agreement to them and promised that they could create more cars with him than Oldsmobile would never succeed. That was in 1902, but at that time, Ford was not yet famous as the automotive company it is today. Instead, Henry Ford was known to have financial problems. The Dodge brothers knew that very well. Even so, they decided not to renew the contract with Oldsmobile in 1903. That would have been safer, but they chose to bet on partnership with Ford. They agreed to provide 650 sets of gear for Ford, which is basically a car without wheels or body, for $250 each. However, Mr. Ford had little money available and often could not pay for the deliveries the Dodge brothers made. This irritated John and Horace to the point that they threatened to sell the machines to someone else, as the contract allowed. However, instead of acting impulsively, the brothers thought better and found a solution. They proposed for Ford to pay the $7,000 that owed them, and in return they would receive 10 shares at Ford Motor Company and all Ford assets if the company went bankrupt. Henry Ford didn't like the idea and tried to offer something different, but realizing that he was in a difficult situation, he accepted the terms of Dodge Brothers. Their relationship with Ford did not start so well, but eventually became prosperous. The brothers' decision to purchase 10% of Ford Motor Company was very intelligent, as this turned out to be very valuable to them. The partnership with Ford helped boost their business, and they would play an important role in the history of the United States auto industry. They made a lot of money from the dividends of their actions, which quickly boosted their finances. In addition, they profited considerably making essential components for all Ford car models between 1900 and 1914, including the famous T-model model. Although Ford has not invented the assembly line, the merit goes to ransom modes. Henry Ford improved the concept by using mobile platforms and a transport system. This allowed the production of a car every 90 minutes. The T model sold millions of units quickly and became the most produced car model in the world. In 1914, it is estimated that 9 out of 10 cars in the world were from Ford. The Dodge brothers expanded their 120 team to more than 5,000 workers, becoming the leading car parts supplier in the world. They became very rich, acquiring large properties and mansions. However, although they have achieved great success and become very rich men, they were not well seen by the high society of Detroit. This was due to the fact that John and Horace liked to go out with their employees after work, attending bars, and sometimes drinking too much. They also had a reputation to get involved in fights in public places. This made them excluded from the city's elitist circles. But they didn't care much about what others thought. In addition, they were gradually accepted in elite social clubs over time. On one occasion, Horace was denied as a member of the prestigious Grosse Pointe Country Club. In response to this, he simply bought a piece of land near the club and built his own private golf course. He bought the property next to the area and built a large, luxurious mansion with space to store 12 cars facing the club. He did it on purpose to draw attention, irritate the guests, and make the club less important. He wanted to show that once poor children in Niles, they were now rich and successful people in the growing industry. They were feeling fulfilled, but they were just beginning because they had larger plans ahead. They were about to do something even bigger, which was to found one of the largest car companies in the world, Dodge Brothers Motor Company. Although the partnership between Henry Ford and the Dodge brothers was successful, it was clear that they would eventually follow different ways. Ford wanted to get rid of the brothers, and John and Horace were also tired of working for someone whose arrogance and stubbornness had bothered them for years. They gave Ford detailed advice on how to improve their cars, including the iconic T model, but Ford never heard them. Instead, he told them to focus on building pieces for his company, which irritated the brothers. Although they are making a lot of money from Ford, the brothers knew that depending on it could only be risky in the future. In 1913, John Dodge decided to leave the position of vice president of Ford Motor Company, saying he was tired of being controlled by Henry Ford. They planned to restructure their business over 18 months, and on July 1st, 1914, launched their own car business, Dodge Brothers Motor Company. Horace and John were known as the best mechanics in Michigan, and their names were associated with quality and reliability. They were ready to build something big on their own. Everything that had to do with quality was linked to the Dodge brand, so it was no surprise when more than 6,000 people came to see the big launch of the first Dodge car, the Model 30. This new Dodge car had a 4-cylinder engine with 35 horses of power, which was 15 horses more than the Ford Model T. In addition to performance, Model 30 was also revolutionary in other ways. It was the first car with all-metal body and had electric headlights, an electrical system of 12 volts, and a speedometer. By 1915, more than 45,000 Dodge cars had already been built and sold. This made Dodge the third best-selling car brand in the United States in just its first full year of production. Unlike Ford, the Dodge brothers did not do annual updates on the models. They focused on mechanical improvements and also added a variety of models in commercial vehicles, such as tourist cars, 2-seat sedans, trucks, roadsters, and taxis. Over time, they increased their focus on trucks and developed different uses for them, such as the Dodge van model. When they asked why Dodge cars were more expensive than Ford's T model, Horace replied, "Just think of all Ford owners who will once want a car." The rivalry between the two brands was beginning to form, and Dodge Brothers Motor Company was growing rapidly. In 1916, they sold 72,000 vehicles, and in 1917, over 100,000. While the brothers built and sold cars, they also maintained a 10% stake in Ford Motor Company. They used the dividends of these actions to fund their own businesses, which meant Henry Ford was indirectly supporting a competitor. That didn't please Ford, and he decided, stop paying dividends to your shareholders and instead use this money to build a large production factory called River Rouge. At the same time, he doubled workers' salaries to $5 a day and drastically reduced T-model prices. Everything in an attempt to grow the company, but impairing investor profits, especially the Dodge brothers. The Dodge brothers filed a lawsuit against Ford for this situation. After 3 years of battle in the courts, they finally won the case. Henry Ford had to pay more than $2 million in late dividends and resume quarterly payments. Frustrated by this, in 1919, Ford decided to buy all the actions of Dodge Brothers Motor Company for $25 million, giving John and Horace a great fortune again. With this purchase of shares and dividends over the years, the brothers ended with an incredible return of 32 times the value of their initial investment of only $10,000. At the same time, they were still enjoying the success of their cars. Automobile companies were so pleased with Dodge vehicles that the brothers did not need to worry too much about marketing. They used slogans such as "He speaks for themselves" or "reliability," a word they themselves invented themselves. Dodge vehicles gained so much reputation that in 1916, a U.S. Army lieutenant used 3 Dodge cars to pursue enemy leaders during an expedition in Mexico against Pancho Villa. This made the vehicles Dodge the first ones used by the United States Army. They later received a contract to provide military vehicles during World War I and chassis for trucks and ambulances in France. They contacted the brothers to help build a 155mm artillery parts mechanisms. These military vehicles compensated for sales losses during the war and helped build the robust reputation of Dodge cars, which is still promoted today. In 1920, the brothers turned their company into the second largest car manufacturer in the United States, behind only Ford. They sold over 145,000 vehicles that year. However, when it seemed that even bigger things were on their way, tragedies happened. The end of the Dodge brothers. On January 2nd, 1920, John and Horace went to New York to the National Automobile Salon. When they returned the following week, they had both contracted flu, which quickly turned into pneumonia. Horace was sick first, and John stood by his bed where he camped, taking care of his brother. However, John was also sick and had to lie in bed immediately. Over time, Horace's health began to improve, but John's condition worsened, leaving everyone around him in great sadness. He died only 10 days later. Horace eventually recovered totally, but was deeply devastated by the loss of his older brother. He expressed his grief, saying that the death of his dear brother was such a loss that he was reluctant to look at the future without his company. Horace continued managing the business, but his health began to decline again after a few months. In August of the same year, he was no longer actively leading the company, choosing to withdraw to his seaside mansion in Palm Beach, seeking rest and recovery. Unfortunately, he never recovered. On December 10, 1920, Horace died of liver cirrhosis just 11 months after his brother's death. After their deaths, the brothers' wives inherited the company and appointed Frederick J. Haynes as responsible for the business. Frederick was, in many ways, a suitable successor for the Dodge, having worked closely with them from the beginning and shared their vision for the company. Under their leadership, they introduced several new models that boosted sales, including a partnership with the Graham brothers to produce heavy trucks. However, the management of Raines as president was short. In 1925, Widows sold the company to an investment bank for $146 million in cash. With the change of property to the bank, Raines was replaced immediately. However, this group of investors had no experience in the auto industry, and as a result, the Dodge company faced many difficulties during this period. It was clear through sales, which fell almost 40% in 1927 compared to the previous year, and its position in the auto market fell to 13th place. After that, the company was on sale once again, and Walter P. Chrysler took the initiative to purchase Dodge for $170 million in 1928. Under Chrysler's management, the company's name was simplified for Dodge, and they focused on affordable price vehicles, similar to the Ford and Chevrolet approach, which had worked well for the business. In the following years, Dodge has developed a line of stylish and powerful cars, establishing a reputation for its high-performance sports models such as Dodge Challenger and Charger. These models have become popular among the best-selling vehicles of the company. On the other hand, Dodge also left its brand in the truck market, launching various models and offering different engine options under the Ram brand. This is the history of Dodge's founders, the two brothers of Niles, Michigan, who played a key role in creating the auto industry in the United States. Unfortunately, they had tragic lives, dying young people despite their rising careers. Despite their achievements, they remain largely as little-known figures, remembered mainly by the millions of cars that take their names. And if you like the history of the Dodge brothers, you will enjoy the news that our Big History channel will bring, complete stories with all the details. Subscribe and be part of this exploitation of the great stories behind the world's greatest moguls and their billionaire businesses.